it got to the point where I was drinking probably 8, 9, 10 bottles of wine a day, constantly. I had to wake up in the middle of the night and drink a bottle of wine so I could go back to sleep and not vomit.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown British Columbia, downtown Prince George, British Columbia. And for all those people watching us around the world, obviously Prince George is most people know Vancouver in British Columbia. We are about 500 miles north of Vancouver, which puts us physically in the middle of British Columbia, and not only north to south, but also east to west. It's a beautiful winter day here in Prince George, and we have a very, very special guest today, and his name is Tony Phelan. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John, and thank you very much.
So,
Glad to
Tony,
be here.
thank you. And you are located in Texas, I believe. What
That's correct. So,
city?
so
Where
we
are you in Texas?
I am just about 20, 30 miles south of Austin, Texas, the capital of Texas, in a town
Okay,
called San Marcos.
okay. And Austin is the capital of Texas, correct?
Correct. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And what is the temperature there? Is it a nice day? It's a sunny day, I'm sure.
It was. It started out, I think, this morning around 50 degrees and then warmed up to about 72. So it was nice throughout midday, sunny and clear skies. Yeah. But, once it starts getting to the 50s and the 40s, us Texans don't get too comfortable. So it's a little uncomfortable for us at that temperature.
Yeah, as I told you before we started already, here in Prince George today, we're around zero. And that means Celsius, it would not be -1, but zero. And then about 2 weeks ago, we had 42 below zero Celsius. And that's about Fahrenheit. Celsius is about the same at 40 -40. So it's a little bit chilly.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say
It's
so.
not uncommon here in northern British Columbia. You know.
Yeah, I would imagine not.
So kind of looking at your bio, Tony, you are an entrepreneur and very active in a lot of companies, but you had a very interesting background. So let's just share with our uh, guests that are watching us. So were you born in Texas, and you were educated there, and then we'll kind of start from there.
Well, no. So my family, my entire family, both sides. Well, my mother is a first generation immigrant. Came over from El Salvador, moved to New York, where she met my father, whose family immigrated from Italy and Ireland, and settled in Long Island, New York. So my father grew up in Queens, met my mom. They got married, and that's where I was born in Long Island, New York. There for a few years before we started moving progressively south. It was Indiana, and then we moved to Texas when I was probably about 12 or 13 years old. So I've been here for most of my life. I'm 46 years old now. And so I consider myself a Texan. I've grown accustomed to this state and Texas proud, as we say. But yeah, definitely started out in New York, but grew up and was educated through high school and college here in Texas. And this is where I
Now,
started my career. And
right, and then just out of curiosity, Phelan is where does that come from? Is that European or Italy or not really, right?
it's Irish. Yeah,
Irish?
Irish. It used to be
Okay,
it used to be O Phelan, and it was anglicized. They lost the O, and it became Phelan.
okay. So that's where a lot of times if I see the last name, I can at least get an indication. I was born in Holland, and I'm a little bit older than you. I was born in November the 1st, 1940. So I just turned 83 about a month or so ago. And,
John, you could have fooled me. You could have fooled me. You look great, man.
oh, well,
You look
thank you.
amazing.
I appreciate that,
Yeah.
Tony. So we have a lot in common. I just want to kind of get a feel of your past, and then you went to school up to grade 12, or up to you were 12. You were in New York, and then or moving south further, and then I presume most of your education you got in Texas.
That's right. Yeah. So we moved here right when I was entering eighth grade for us, which is the year before high school here in the States. And we I started out in a town north of Houston, Texas, called the Woodlands, a very affluent part of Texas,
Okay,
the Woodlands. But we were middle class, so we weren't. It was kind of a culture shock for me
right,
and to enter into high school in such an affluent area. But
right.
I had everything going for me. A great family life. My father was a well-educated individual, received his doctorate from Notre Dame University. My mother was a self-starter, a business owner, as a first-generation immigrant from El Salvador, and so we had a good lifestyle.
Any siblings?
Um, in the middle of three, yes, I have a younger brother, an older sister. Yeah, very close
Okay,
in age.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, and then so
Yeah.
you got your education in Texas.
Yeah. So I graduated from the high school, the local high school, and got a track and cross country scholarship to run for the University of Texas in San Antonio. I went there, and that didn't last long. It lasted one semester before I lost my scholarship, and that's the first big hit that I took in terms of my alcohol use. It was getting kicked out of, or losing my scholarship directly related to the consumption of alcohol and drugs.
You were
And
not even 20 then, right? Were you?
no, and I was very young too. When I got to college, I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
So I started. We were. I started dabbling when I was about 16 in high school, and I'll tell you, my first intervention actually occurred at age 16 by a group of concerned friends who didn't like the way I acted when I drank, excuse me,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
pulled me aside. And for those of you for your viewers, I am a recovered alcoholic. I drank for a little over 20 years, 20, 23, 24 years before I found sobriety at age 40. But that was
Six
my
years
first
ago.
intervention. Yeah, my first intervention and first sign that it was an issue was at that young of an age. I was a very angry drinker. I was a very angry young man in general, and
Why?
you know, it all stemmed from my father's illness. My father struggled with cancer from the day I can remember. When he was receiving his doctorate and writing his thesis at Notre Dame, we lived on campus housing, or just off campus, but it was provided by the university. And he was going through radio. So for as young as I can remember, he was either going through some type of treatment, or having a recurrence of cancer. It was head and neck cancer. He wasn't a smoker. He lived a very healthy lifestyle. It was just luck of the draw. And
How,
I
how
think,
did that affect? So that affected you, you say, in what way? Other than the obvious,
well, I was very defensive. So
right?
it took a lot away from my father. He was disfigured due to it, facially disfigured, lost an eye, lost an orbital bone. So
Oh
half of
no.
his face was very deformed.
Oh
And
no.
I was always on edge. I was always on edge. I always felt like I had to. I was always ready to fight.
So the cancer that he had, so that was just to get a feeling of it, because it kind of really affected him physically.
Yeah.
other
So
than the
my father,
obvious?
right, he was an extremely intelligent individual. He was a an educator, and it affected him to the point where he couldn't do his job. So he would do odd jobs. I would, with the doctor from Notre Dame, he was a very humble man, and he did what it took to support his family. He would do paper routes, work as a McDonald's employee. Mow lawns. I went with him on these jobs.
Right.
As a child. Um, I remember he just anything he could do to make ends meet because he couldn't hold a regular job due to the constant treatments.
And how old were
Sorry.
you then when kind of as a young person still, maybe less than 16, I presume, you were a young individual, seeing this happening with your dad, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I was what, third, fourth grade, most likely right around that age when we lived in Indiana, is when I would go out on jobs with him. But yeah,
Right.
and part of that was when we lived in New York as well. When he lost his eye to surgery is when we lived in Monticello, New York, before we moved to
Wow.
Indiana. Yeah.
Wow. You
So it
so you
affected me.
yeah you
It
were
was quite.
you were very young.
Yeah, yeah, I was. And, watching someone that you admire so much go through so much pain on a constant basis and then constantly have to fight back. And, it's it was a, it was a struggle for me, but, nothing compared to what he struggled with. But, he
No,
fought
no.
it for 30 years and he had 5 recurrences, but he overcame quite a bit. And, he has his own story. We won't get into that, but he has a book called Running with Cancer by William Phelan, PhD, and it's his life and battle through cancer and how running actually saved him. And he was an ultra marathoner. He ran, the big runs.
Wow.
But yeah, he was very very inspirational individual. And
Is he still alive?
nope, he passed at age 60 in 2008. Unfortunately, was never able to see me as a sober adult.
Right.
But he lost the battle after 30 years.
Yeah. So that then kind of, so he was 60, and so you were then went to university, and then obviously already had the drinking issue. But did you used to drink? What was your became your
You
habit?
know, in college, it was anything, and it was hard to decipher whether I had an issue or not, or if I was just a regular college kid drinking and
Right.
getting in fights, whatnot. So, it was easily overlooked by my family, at least, as, he'll get over it. It's just
Yeah.
a
It's part of
phase.
growing up, right?
Right. But, I never grew up and
Yeah.
I kept at it. So as I grew older, it turned into hard liquor. As I grew even older, it turned into wine. And I became a, a great admirer of wine and a wine enthusiast. And I kind of masked it there as well. I was a wine drinker, and, but it got to the point. I mean, if you want to skip way ahead, it got to the point where I was drinking probably 8, 9, 10 bottles of wine a day, constantly. I had to wake up in the middle of the night and drink a bottle of wine so I could go back to sleep and not vomit. So
Wow.
it progressed. It progressed, but, I think I would consider myself as an alcoholic, most likely in my late 20s. It's hard to decipher from problem drinking to actual alcoholism, right? I mean, you can say it's the same thing, but real physiological dependence on the substance of alcohol started occurring probably around the age of 30, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's
So
when I needed to function.
so the and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But my dad was drafted into the Dutch army, April 1940, when we were invaded by the German armies in Holland, and we would not see him for 5 years. We didn't know he was dead or alive. The last time they saw him was at the bombing of Rotterdam, which destroyed the whole center of Rotterdam, which is a big city, and and he did come back after the liberation, but was gone for 5 years. I had, like you, I have a brother that was 2 years older than me. A sister was 1 year older. I was born in November 1940. So my mom was pregnant with me when he was drafted. But when he came back, I would say to people, and especially now, with all the things that are going on around us in the world, if I look at the wars in the Ukraine and Middle East, Iran, and all those difficult places, and especially with young people, but also with others, that the people that don't fully appreciate how fortunate we are in North America, especially the United States and Canada, that have democratic governments, not dictatorships, or are not in war. I fly around a lot. I have a lot of businesses. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I spend a lot of times in planes. We do business in the United States, Texas as well, all throughout. And when I'm sitting in a plane, I'm also a pilot, but mainly talking commercial. I usually sit by the window and I look outside. I'd say it's paradise. And I say that virtually every day when I look outside, because I've been a child that was born in war and saw not only war, but the things that followed. Already saw far too much that I shouldn't have seen, and got the feeling of hunger. Still today, I can feel that, although this was nearly 70 years ago. Still have the feeling of cold, because we had nothing to heat the house or the little place where we were with my mom. As little kids, we would go with gunny sacks into the railroad yards and pick up anything edible or burnable. And the reason that we did, the three of us, every day, is that the Germans would not shoot us, they boot us one, and the following day we'd be back. But all of that came back, and with anxiety or the fear of losing that one parent, that always stayed with me. And I, in fact, got counseling for it when well into my 50s for the inner child. Very emotional.
That's
So,
incredible.
so the
That is
point that
incredible.
I'm making is that for all of those people that are watching us from around the world, and a lot of them will appreciate it, is that appreciate peace in those countries that are democratic, and sometimes appear to believe that they would like to have a dictatorship or leaning towards that. Try it out a little bit in Russia, Korea, Iran, and we can go on and on about those places, Cuba, that are not as fortunate as we are, and that the people that are exposed to war do not believe that after the war is over, everything goes back to normal. It doesn't. It can be a generation, or it can be even longer than that. And the point that I wanted to make is this one, is that even with my dad, their relationship was never the same again, although they passed away years ago. My mom was 83, and my dad passed away. No, and she was 83, and my dad was 80 when he passed away a long time ago. And they were born in 1915. So they saw a lot. First World War, the difficulties of the Depression of the 30s, and then the Second World War in particular, with all the things. So he became alcoholic had a dependence on alcohol, so didn't run around the streets no, he it became a way of life, and it was his way of dealing with PTSD and the other things that had happened that they then could not talk about or not emotional express themselves. And and I knew him always like that, even well into, I left Holland for Canada 60 years ago, but even when I grew up, I always grew up with him. He would, when he came home, he started drinking Geneva. I don't know what you would call that here, but it's tastes terrible. And I always said to myself, I will never do that. And if I hope somebody slaps me around and say, no, you're not going to do that. But I kind of fell into that as well, to a certain extent, for a number of years, and then stopped, for about 5, 6 years. And then, then my wife, or my then girlfriend I was in love with, dumped me, and that kind of made me wake up. So, and since the time I don't drink, but the point that I wanted to make is that, that alcohol became part of my life indirectly and affected me and the people around them, because he tended to become defensive of it, although he didn't yell, scream, or was abusive, but it was always a topic you didn't want to say too much about. And but it bothered me. But in the meantime, he had the ability to be functional, so it became part of his life. And that for me, always thought, I want to make sure I admired him for what he was and what he did, and the hard work and how successful he had become. But alcohol was a part of it, and it was not good, at least not for him. But I slipped into that as well. And then the other part about it, Tony, is that and growing up and then spending time here in northern British Columbia, in the forest industry in particular, in this town that I'm in, Prince George was a boom town. When I came here in 1965, and alcohol everything was about alcohol. Looking behind me, used to be a street and about one bar after another. It was a place where you lived, that they would ask you the question, hey Tony, you live in Prince George, so when did you come here and when are you leaving? Because it was one of the places where you made money and then you wanted to get out. It has changed since that time, but things are changing in other ways as well. Here, at 9 o'clock in the morning, you go into somebody's office and then you say, oh, you want a drink? Okay, what would you like? What have you got? Well, what would you like? My bottom drawer is all full. It's whatever you want is available. Today, things have changed, that it is much less acceptable, and people don't do that as much here as they used to do. And then the other part about it is that more and more, as we become concerned about our health, it's not healthy. And so we hear that more and more as we become more knowledgeable about it. How do I stay fit and healthy? And I'm writing a book, actually, that I have a number of books I'm going to show you. I want to show you this one, and I want you to show me some of yours as well. This one will come out later on this year in August. Can you
Living
see it?
Young, Dying.
Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me on it, actually. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America at 83. So competed for the nationals and for the Arnolds. And then COVID came, and now I'm competing again in 25 at 85 at the Arnold. So I talked to Arnold already. He said, yeah, he'll be there for me, work out with me, and then take pictures with me at in 25. But I just wanted to give you a bit of background on alcohol, how it played a part in my life in a critical way, the way I grew up, slipped into it myself for a period, and then only so we were about 4 or 5 years in a relationship. I was in love with my wife, and she dumped me because I smoked. I had a little people pipe, and then I was on Xanax because prescribed, because that and then I was drinking scotch and water as a habit, and she dumped me. I mean, this was not warning. She dumped me, gone, and so then and then at some point we got back together. We're still married now. We've been together for 40 years. But that's yeah, since the time I've not drunk again. The hardest thing for me to stop was Xanax. Very
Yeah, and Xanax
addictive.
has a very long withdrawal period. It's very difficult to detox individuals off of benzodiazepines. So, one of my businesses, what I consider my main business is I I get people to treatment. I get people to treatment, but I will encounter individuals when they're in crisis mode, when they are in withdrawal, when they need acute level care, hospital level care. My team will intervene, get them to one of our facilities, whether in Houston or the Austin, San Antonio areas, but in Texas, get them medically stabilized, and then get them to treatment the next day. So, but with benzodiazepines, it's much longer than any other substance. It takes a little bit longer, and
So
extremely difficult.
So I wanted to give you some view of me, that I've been, and so the other part about me is that I came here when I was 23 years old, and I've been here now for 60 years in the Prince George area, and started with nothing. I came off the bus here actually in July of 1965, and wanted to start with nothing. Actually, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, and I started with $25.47. But what I did have is attitude. I'm always thinking, no matter how tough today is, tomorrow will be better. I have passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%, and work ethic. And I get up even now at 5:30 in the mornings, and I still work 60, 70 hours a week. And if you do that, you give it all you got, but will follow is success. And so, and subsequently, it's not about me and being successful, but I've done well, and but I just want to share with you some of my background, and where there were challenges along the way, that then, and having exposure to challenges along the way as well. And then the other part with me is that I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times, and and then many years later, actually in 1997, when I was here in Canada, I went into a store. I picked up a book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction, and it was about ADHD. And I
Uh,
said, "Oh my God, that's me," and and it was then considered to be had stigma attached to it, and at the same time, I'm building companies. And if I go to the bank and I want to borrow all kinds of money, hundreds of thousands or millions, whatever it is, and I make my business plan, and then say to them, by the way, I have a mental disorder called ADHD. They would say, have a nice day. So obviously not so today, but as I learned more about it, I call it a superpower. And
Ah,
I wrote a book about it, and ADHD Unlocked is the title. Very popular, actually. And so that had an effect on my life, and and became a critical part in my life as to kind of looking back to the war years, which affected me and obviously, in our family, uh, being liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. I was so impressed by the Canadians that I knew I would go to the land of my heroes. That affected
ah,
me. And then not being academically very successful, obviously, and your fellows that are, even when you're grade 7, and the friends around you as they go to college and university, I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then it was not looked at as being really normal or acceptable. I was a bit of a failure, and so I wanted to go to the land of my dreams, and then I still struggle with the fact that I had failed, and all those combinations, and it starting with nothing. It brought me to a place here. I wanted to build a lumber mill. I did that and did a number of other things. But so just kind of sharing with you some of my background that led me, although I always said to myself, I saw lots of alcohol all around me. I've seen what it can do in the family. And I always said, I'm not going to do that. And if I do that, I hope somebody shakes me up. Well, my now wife did in our relationship. That got me the message. And since that time, I don't drink and I have no issue with it. But what I hear more and more today, it's not socially as acceptable as it was back then when I came here. And then the other part about it is that it's not healthy. It's not good for you physically.
right. And that's a couple years before I got sober. I attempted to get sober, so I tried for a couple years before I was actually successful. Um, but the catalyst for that was seeing my primary care physician, having and divulging to the physician that, hey, I have an issue with drinking, just so you know. So we ran some labs, and the labs came back, and I had elevated liver enzymes. I mean, so much so that he said, you are walking around with the liver of of an 80-year-old alcoholic. And it freaked me out because I always considered myself a healthy person. I was a a college caliber runner. I was always an athlete. I lifted weights from my 20s till now. I'm still a gym rat. And I even through all my alcoholic days, I was always in the gym still. But inside, I was destroying my insides. I was destroying my organs. So on the outside, I may had appeared somewhat healthy, but on the inside, I was destroying myself. So yeah, it'll destroy you. I mean, it's just the this it's just it's so much worse than people can really imagine if you haven't been through it. It's really a destructive
It
substance.
sounds to me, Tony, that especially in the last number of months, that there is more discussion about, and I'm very much in touch with U.S. media, CNN, and all the other ones. We all appears to be a lot the same country because but they are much more proactive in suggesting that any amount of alcohol is not good for you, and so most of them I've ever heard before, but I've seen in places like this where it was commonplace, for people drank a lot. That's what they did. That was you go someplace where it's it's all liquor, and not so today.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Look, it's I have yet to find one highly successful individual in my circle that has told me that alcohol has amplified their life in a positive way. I mean, it's just it doesn't occur. It's never happened.
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
find one for me, but I won't believe them. I
The
mean,
opposite. More
exactly.
so.
It's
Yeah.
detrimental.
Yeah.
If you can, I tell all the individuals that I coach and I've helped. Sobriety is a must.
Yeah.
Get rid of your vices. Vices is what is going to pull you down. And you even see that a lot with the people that work in my industry in the substance use disorder field. They simply trade one vice for another. I would say probably 75% of the men and women that I work with, my fellow uh, you know individuals that work in this field, most likely smoke or vape or overeat. They just trade one vice for another, and addicts typically do that. It's very rare that you find an addict that completely is aligned. And even though the treatment modalities and the therapy suggests that you become aligned, you have structure, you become self-aware, you have systems in place, they still will trade the drug or the alcohol for another vice. And it's usually
Yeah.
overeating, drink, or overeating, excuse me, sex, or vaping or smoking. You
Yeah.
see it often. And that's why a lot of these people always end up relapsing because they're
Yeah.
not truly aligned.
Yeah. So just want to talk about the businesses that you are involved in. Is that you had a term for it that you mentioned, substance dependent industry?
Substance use disorder, right? So
Yeah.
SUD is the medical term that we
Okay.
use in the industry. Substance use disorder, SUD. Um, and Yeah, so I work in the in that industry. I work with several facilities in the Texas area to provide that first level of intervention when clients are needing help. We get patients when they're in severe withdrawal and have to get them stabilized, and then we try to find services for them, whether it's outpatient or inpatient treatment. And that's when I got sober. That's the company I started. I was always successful to some degree, but I grew comfortable in that mediocre success, and I didn't think I needed anything else. So when I became sober, I set out to create my own business, and I didn't go to rehab. I didn't go to rehab. I didn't go to any formal treatment. I essentially just set some systems in place for myself, and structured my life in such a way that I wouldn't relapse. And in hindsight, if you look at what my day looks like and what my values and what my lifestyle consists of, it aligns with the therapy that you would receive in treatment. So a lot of this uh, personal development um, uh, is very closely related, intertwined with the 12 steps or any
Right.
treatment that you would receive. But yeah, that's so that I started that business shortly after I became sober, and I wanted to
That
help
was when
people.
you were 40.
Yep, when I was 40 years old, so
Yeah.
I'm almost 47, and yeah, so it was a way, almost selfishly, to stay sober myself. I said, okay, I'm going to help people. I'm going to be of service. I'm going to live by certain guidelines that I do not deter from. Rain, sleet, or snow, as the post office used to say, I will not deter from this. I will get up at 4 a.m. every morning. I will get
Yeah.
to the gym. I will
Yeah.
count my macronutrients, and I will eat a healthy diet. I will every night before I go to sleep, I will write my to-do list so that I can wake up in the morning and I know what I'm going to do and what order I'm going to do it in. My day is lined up for me minute by minute. I mean, and if I can get everything done on that checklist throughout the day, it's a miracle. But sometimes I do. And then throughout the day, I just constantly check myself. Am I vibrating at a high frequency? And am I functioning at a high frequency? If I'm not, then I check myself and I get myself to a higher vibration. Um, I'm I meditate as well, and that usually helps with that. Go ahead.
Now, it appears to me like you have discipline, personal discipline, and the people with ADHD do not necessarily have that unless they understand that, like in my case, by the time that I picked up the book in the store, driven to distraction, I opened it. I never quite knew why. I thought I was as bright as all the other guys and girls, the kids that I grew up with, but I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what should we do with this guy? Send him to the mentally challenged school? Or my parents were beautiful people. They said, no, we'll get him a trade. And so at 13, I worked in a furniture factory, but underlying, looking back, was ADHD, the attention issues that are typical with people with ADHD, and easily getting bored if they are not really interested in it, or staying focused, are some of the challenges. And so in my particular case, that I got so many things that I do. I'm since I was a late bloomer, and so by the time I read the book and I started looking at it and started understanding ADHD, it took me 5 years before I saw my personal doctor that delivered our 2 girls, and then who was a personal friend, that he said, I went into his office. I was 62 then, and he said, why are you here, John? I said, I think I got ADHD. And he checked it out and he said, yeah, you do. And so then the more I found out about it, then I started, and so I then, I do a lot of things. I have about 8 or 10 different companies, and then I'm a speaker, on a circuit, and then I'm a podcaster, very active, I write books, and I'm a go-go guy. And they say, how do you do all these things? I say, ADHD. That's the reason. So that's what I do.
Your superpower. Yeah,
My
your
superpower.
superpower.
And
Right.
then the
And
same thing that I do as you do is that I know I have to stay fit mentally, physically, and then so I'm lucky again. My wife, she is a vegan, so I call myself 80/20, and maybe even more than 80, 85 probably. And the interesting part is I do all the shopping for her. We have a place in Victoria, which is southern part of Prince George's in the center. And usually the weekends, Friday afternoon, I go to Victoria, come back here on Monday mornings, and then on the weekends spend down there. We have a farm there. We ride dressage. We have 7 horses, and a beautiful place. And one of the things that I do is I do all the shopping. And if I go to the shopping, I stay on the outside of the store where all the healthy stuff is, and
exactly. Stay out in the middle.
mainly plant-based, so. But I do the shopping even for her, and she's very particular. But I know exactly what we are looking for, and and that's again very much part of staying fit and healthy. And I go to the gym 3-4 times a week, and train between 5, 6, 7 hours. I'm a fairly active individual. I have a trainer that I work with. I have a goal. I want to go back to the Arnold's in 2025, and I try to stay fit and healthy, and that's the objective.
Well, that explains it. I mean, when we first started the podcast, I commented on your appearance. You look great. So you don't, I mean, I hope you didn't take offense. I said you don't look 83. Not no offense to any 83 year
Oh
olds,
no,
but
yeah, I get it lots of times. Yeah,
but
it
yeah, you look fit.
it's
I could
all about
automatically tell.
staying. Diet is critical, and then exercise is critical, and that's why I'm writing the book. Living young, dying old. It's not about age; it's quality of life, and I want to get to 120.
Yeah, and I won't doubt that you will. I mean, I'd love to read the book. So when are you going to finish it? When do you think it's going to be completed and published?
This one is finished we release it in August. And so we
Okay.
are nearly done with it, and I'll make sure you get a copy. And in fact, let me show you some of the other books that I have here as well. Is that the other part that happened with me, Tony, is that going through all the stuff and all the things that I've done, people said to me, "You should write a book about it." And now, as you already know, writing books is not easy. And so I thought about it for a long time, and I kept starting, stopping, starting, stopping, and then for about 20 years. And then I thought, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. And so I started it about 5, 6 years ago, and then this is the first one that I have, Against All Odds. And it's an autobiography, and as you well know, I've never written a book in my life, and obviously the language that I grew up in is Dutch, and I couldn't speak English when I got here. And then even in Holland, I grew up. I don't know if you're familiar with Holland. Holland's not very big, but I grew up in the northeastern part, and we speak a dialect there, and our dialect is not Dutch, and it's difficult to understand. It's not High Dutch, and so I loved speaking dialect. So the first challenge that I had, I had to learn to speak the High Dutch, and then I barely got that under control. Then I'm in Canada now. I've started all over again speaking English. Anyway, with an autobiography, you cannot write it and then say, I don't like it, I'm doing another one. You got one chance at it, you better do it right. I like this one, I'm going to send it to you. And then the other one
Please
that I
do.
did, is that I find so many people, they say they don't like what they are doing. And I say, change, because if you don't like what you're doing, you take that home and it affects everything that you're doing. And then I do a lot of presentations to young people, and and I ask them a lot of times, you're going to school, or you're in college or university, and saying, what do you want to do in your career? And saying, well, I don't know. I said, well, start checking, at least respectfully. What I do is I want to know what the other jobs are. I want to be a carpenter or a builder. I'm going to check with people that do that. Then I want to be a truck driver, check there. I want to be a doc. I want to be a lawyer or whatever, right? So check, or maybe even an entrepreneur. Check to people that do this. I did that when I was young. I always loved to. I would go all over the place in Holland to listen to people that had been successful and kind of figure out what made them click. So I wrote a book about
Right.
it, and so I thought it was important. Finding your passion, living the dream. And the fair question would be, say, hey, John, are you living the dream? I am. So every day I enjoy what I'm doing, and and I believe I'll send you copies of these books. I'm going to sign them for you.
I would love that. I would love that. And you hit on a point that when working with youth, to tell them to look into other professions or follow people that might have a certain level of success, and that's a huge part of my mentality as well. Look, I think you have to surround yourself with people that are either on your level or are far surpassed your level. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, I always
Definitely.
say, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." Right?
Definitely.
And for a lot of young people, it's very easy just to follow the herd, go along with the regular expected things that you're supposed to do. But it's the very rare few that leave the herd and do their own thing that find success, and that seek out mentorship, and that seek out individuals that have success that surpasses theirs. And that's the only way you're going to learn. And even the biggest names that we know of have mentors. Even
Yeah,
the big or advisors, are
no
people that
question.
they counsel with. So I mean, if they are seeking mentorship, then why aren't people that haven't quite found what they want to do yet, or are floundering in life? So it's a huge missed opportunity, in my opinion, for our youth today.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, Tony, because when I was in Holland, and even then I was a laborer, I would go through my way and find in different cities people that were speaking and listen to them and finding what the connections, what makes them successful. The other thing that I did when I left Holland, I wanted to start from the bottom up to prove something to me that I could do it. And I took this suitcase with 2 sets of clothes and 3 books, and came to Canada. And then and I told you came off the bus here with 2547. But the fair question would be, okay, John, what books did you take? Well, I took Management by Drucker in Dutch. And I kind of wore that book out, and I admired him, and I still have it today. And then the other book that I took is Logical Thinking in Dutch. And to me, that was important. And then the other one was about Canada. And then if I look at me today, what makes me successful is that, and I mean that in a positive way, not saying hurrah, hurrah, John, but what made
Of
me
course.
successful is that attitude, passion, work ethic. I give it everything that I got. And then the other part about it is that determination. And then I have the, I'm, I have an amazing memory. I don't, and that's not uncommon with people with ADHD. And then I'm very good with numbers, and and then the other part in business, and in other businesses where I'm successful, is that I'm good strategically planning forward. 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. And in most of the businesses that I'm involved in, those were always the key elements of looking forward. It sounds like logical, but then to develop a management style that follows that is very, very important. And then the other part that I found, Tony, is that indirectly affecting me not feeling good about myself, other than the fact that I didn't know I was ADHD, is that when I came to Canada, and even in my business, I was already successful, I had difficulty interacting with more than 2 or 3 people, mainly in my company. If I had to do presentations outside of that, I was not good at that. And it was my sister-in-law, actually, that at one point, ex-sister-in-law, actually, I still was friend, but, she, at one point, she said to me, "Hey, John, why don't you go with me to Toastmasters?" I said, "Toastmasters? What's that all about?" And she said, "Well, they specialize in developing communication skills." And I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll go." And I said, "Are they going to ask me any questions?" She said, "No, you just sit there and you just watch it." Okay, I said, "That's good." So I was there for about middle of the meeting, and then all of a sudden somebody stood up and said, "Hey, John, tell us all about you." And I said, "Oh my God, I'll never go back here." But I stayed there for about 10 years
Oh, wow.
and
Wow.
became
Okay.
a distinguished Toastmaster, the highest level that you can get to, and that changed my life. And so it gave me confidence and then the ability to communicate, become an effective communicator. And I didn't have that skill set before that. So if I look then back at my life, that the war years were difficult and obviously affected by PTSD, the inner child. Then school was difficult. Obviously, I was troubled by my dad and alcohol, although he was a beautiful person and all of that, but it troubled me because I knew it affected him in a way in their relationship. And I said, I will never do that myself, but then slipped into that, at least for a period of time, and obviously then came out of it. But the other part that affected me, then the other part making the decision, or meeting the Canadians and knowing that I would go to the land of my heroes, and then leaving with nothing, started with nothing, and then what followed. But then it was not until I kind of could connect it all, was in January 1997 when I found that book, Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Elwell in 1993 about ADHD. Dr. Elwell, an amazing individual, ADHD actually, has written about 18 books. I had him on my podcast 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
Can you
nice,
can you
nice.
imagine that? And
Right,
so
the guy that changed your entire perspective ended up being on
and
your
we talked
podcast.
about that, so and
Yeah.
and so so I say I'm a late bloomer, because I was 62 until I kind of connected all of those things. The other part that as I really enjoy, Tony, is podcasting.
Yeah, and I can see why you're good at it, and it's and it broadens your knowledge base. I mean, you get to learn, you get to talk, you get to converse with people that you normally might not converse with. But there's one thing, John, that you mentioned there that you developed that a lot of people I think today are lacking, and that's a sense of emotional intelligence, right? The ability to effectively communicate our values, uh, or our feelings, or have empathy. And I think we're so digitized these days, or the younger generations, that it's become very difficult for individuals to be intelligent in an emotional capacity,
Exactly.
and that's extremely important. That's one of the principles that I try to impart on people when I'm working with them. But so I see a lot of similarities there.
But I say, Tony, a lot of times when I talk to people, especially young people, I say, people are so sensitive about how they look, and this is not quite right, that's not quite right, and what I'm wearing is not this and that. I say, be at peace with who you are. There is only one of you on this whole earth, and you are special. And special not meaning better than, but you are special as to who you are, and feel that way about yourself, and rather than to being totally preoccupied how other people look at you, what they think about you, and all those other things. But you are unique and you are special, and I think
I,
that's very important.
I agree with you as well. And today, with social media, and I mean, we could do 3 podcasts on this, but I mean, just with social media and the way people put themselves out there, it's great. It's an amazing thing to have, but at the same time, it can be very detrimental to somebody who, especially our youth. You see people, you know, uh, committing suicide for certain, for online bullying and this and that. But it's to your point, it's extremely important that people have confidence, believe in themselves, and I think the belief in oneself and the ability to kind of block out anyone. Basically, it just boils down to don't care about what other people think. It doesn't matter, because the
Exactly.
only thing that matters is the way you think about yourself.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, nobody, has anybody's opinion ever paid your bills? Has anybody's opinion ever helped you here or helped you there? No. The only opinion that matters is your own. And
Exactly.
when I really wish more people, especially our young people, would understand that. And I was, you say you're a late bloomer. I consider myself a late bloomer as well. I was reborn, I guess I could say, at 40 years old, and and I'm still young to the sobriety in the grand scheme of things, but and I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly
Exactly.
learning. And I have a vision. I have a clear vision of where I want to be, and I'm working towards that. But you have to be a student of the game, a student of the game of life. You have to be willing to risk things, and you know, I think it was who was it that said? I think it was John D. Rockefeller that possibly said, "Don't be to risk the good for achieving greatness." Something like that. I'm paraphrasing,
Right.
but
Right.
I think that's went a little bit off on a tangent there, but I think that's important to recognize as well. So many people are comfortable being comfortable that
Exactly.
it's scary to potentially risk your where you are right now to achieve greatness.
You see, and that's why it is important for me. It's not so much that I'm not writing books to become rich on. That's not what I'm doing. Whatever I do, growing up in Holland and with my background, it's always been important to be part of the community, always giving back, and that doesn't mean it has to be a lot, but in some form or fashion, become part of it, and then the and sharing with others
Mm-hmm.
experiences that can be helpful. And I try to do that in my podcast. I try to do that in my books, and I do that in presentations that I give and all those other things. The interesting part I was going to mention, Tony, is that in all the presentations that I do, and I love to do live presentations, but they take so much of my time. A lot of times, if I have to go to another place, and I find that the podcasting has become an amazing vehicle, really, a platform.
Uh,
And not so long ago, you couldn't do this the way, other than it would interrupt, it would not work, it would not, but now it is. And there you sitting in Texas, and I'm sitting in Prince George, and we developed this relationship. But the other part about it is that we already know, not to blow our own horns, but I know thousands and thousands of people will be watching our dialogue and
yeah, and that's
taking
amazing,
bits
right?
and pieces of it.
Exactly, and that's the amazing thing about these platforms. You have so much reach, and
Exactly.
and you mentioned that and you preface yourself, you've cut yourself off before you started saying something a couple times by prefacing with, "I'm not tooting my own horn," and
Right.
and I understand that because it's very sometimes the line is blurred between people being braggadocious and bragging and flaunting what they consider their own success, and simply doing it because sharing your story can literally light the path for someone else to start their journey. And
Exactly.
that's what I do. I mean, I have a certain life experience. You have a certain life experience. And if we don't use this platform to share that life experience, then we are being extremely selfish. I mean, that can be
Exactly.
one of the most selfish things to do, is to not share your story. I mean, I tell my
Exactly.
friends all the time, get online, talk, post something. If you're not sharing your successes, then I mean, you have the potential to help somebody. When I
Exactly.
started posting, my posts were horrible, right? On Instagram, on TikTok or whatever. I didn't even know how to make a video, but I would post, I would start saying some things, and you would be surprised at how about my sobriety usually. And you'd be surprised about how many messages I got from people that I hadn't spoken to in years that said, "Tony, your post changed my life." Your post
Yeah.
just the other day, a week ago, an individual messaged me, "Your last post saved my life. I'm in detox right now." So the person
Exactly.
went to treatment. So
Unbelievable.
it's selfish to hold your story for yourself. Your story doesn't
Yeah.
belong to you; it belongs to everyone. And
And that's how I agree with you 100%. And that's how I
Mm.
look at it. And this forum is absolutely fabulous for it. So
Agreed.
Tony,
Agreed.
we this is my 212th podcast where I'm hosting, and then I've done about 75, 76 where I'm a guest at other podcasts, so I really enjoy it. And then, did you have a book that you want to share with us or a website before we go?
Sure. So I've never written a book, but John, I may just do that. You may have inspired me to do that. But I communicate through Instagram. So
Okay.
if you have it anywhere on it's my first and last name, Tony with a Y underscore Phelan, which is my last name. P is in Paul, Helan, and then level up. But level is spelled LVL. So Tony underscore Phelan level up on Instagram. You can find me there, DM me, shoot me a message, watch some of my posts. But yeah, that's the best way.
And then Scott will probably be in contact with you about your address so I can send you, I'll sign the books for you and send them to you. And then our podcast, we usually release them the following day. We don't change anything on the edits, save and except I stopped the show. We'll probably take that little piece out, but just to get because it was interrupt, I just wanted to make sure that it was okay. But otherwise, it will show the way it is, and it will come out tomorrow. Is it tomorrow, Andrew? Yeah, tomorrow. So it's available to all your listeners and all your friends on your podcast.
All right, and thank you, John. I had a great time, and I look very much forward to receiving those books and giving them a read. Thank you.
Tony, it was a privilege and a pleasure to have our discussion, and we'll stay in touch.
All right, take care, John.
Thanks, Tony. Take care.